So they innovative, and I admire her things.
Not a Daniel. Not a Daniel. I just see her face.
Morning, guys. Dave,
Good morning. Good morning, you wonderful Rotarians. On this foggy day, if you were a bunch of zebras, you would be a zeal of zebras. So, yes, here.
It is there.
Let's begin. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And our four-way test
Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will build goodwill and friendships will be beneficial to all concerned.
All right. Thank you all for being here on this great day. It's November 25th, the year 2025. It's day number 328. The Packers looking good, 7-3-1. We'll just skip the other one. Vikings are 4-7. The Badgers, after a wonderful win, are now 2-6 in the conference, 4-7 overall. If they beat Minnesota, they'll be eligible for a bowl game. Not that I'm pulling for that. Minnesota is 4-4, 6-5 overall. Things you probably don't know, don't need to know, but I'm going to tell you anyway. An adult turkey has approximately 3,500 feathers. Now you're wise. See, things you don't need to know. Don't have any birthdays this week. We do have a club anniversary. Rick Kemp, 14 years you've been in this club. Our guest today is Madelyn. Is it Jahnke? All right. I only know that because I have an in-law with that name. All right, but they didn't spell it like that. But it just they just made it easier to put a Y on it. Okay, a little poem that I've written for today. Thanksgiving at Grandma's meant cousins perched at the kids' table. We laughed, we lied, we eavesdropped while swinging short legs neath the kids' table. Now, grown-ups are gone, and the cousins have grown. All over the country, far apart and distance and caring, we've flown. Oh, how I'd love to gather again with cousins around the Thanksgiving kids' table. There you go. For those of you who have kids, table.
For that. All right. So let us go to the member minute, and I saw Aaron here. So Aaron, for you. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know what to talk about.
You got a minute.
Okay.
Decide.
Look, I just did this not too long ago. I grew up in like Green Lake area of Wisconsin. My dad and my mom probably made a lot of financial mistakes in their life. So my dad said education is the way to fix it. So they sent me away to a boarding school in high school, and then I fought that and joined the army. And then I ended up going to college. I went to Marquette, and then I went out to Yale, got a master's, and then my wife and I moved to Madison. I started a PhD, but went back at the university. So education has always probably been an important role in my life, and it kind of helped me propel myself to where I am today, and the family that I have, and three wonderful children that have all been highly successful. So, but with that, I was a little. I was probably on the remote side of Rotary for a while because I had to take a big test. So I just passed my certified financial planning 6-hour exam on the 12th of November. So I had to pass 6 tests prior to that. Estate planning, insurance, tax, retirement planning, investments, general principles, a whole bunch of stuff. But I had to sit for this test for 6 hours. I started studying in April, and I really started studying in August. And I think if I wouldn't have passed, my wife would have divorced me. So with that, I'm pretty excited, and now I can actually be here a little more often. But I don't get to use the initials yet because I have to pass the background check, but I'm not too worried about that. So, never been arrested, and I don't have anything that I'm worried about. But
Are they gonna ask us for opinion?
they might. They might.
I'm not telling them you're part of Rotary.
Well, we'll see. But that's the exciting news for me. I'm glad it's done. I'm glad it's over. It was way harder than I expected. It took me about 2 years to go through the coursework, pass all the exams. I had to drive to Green Bay for a 6-hour exam. And it's so wonderfully exciting. You take the 6-hour exam and you're exhausted. I literally want to take a nap about 4.5 hours in. And it's a black screen, and all it says in about size 4 font is pass.
That's it.
So, but my children are home for Thanksgiving, so that's one. Well, 2 of them are. Jacob lives here, but he works. So I'll have a wonderful time with them. And my daughter's at the University of Iowa as a sophomore now in a pre-law track. I have a middle daughter who still lives at home. She is a cosmetologist. And then my oldest is an ICU nurse at Redmond. And he's married and lives on the side. So with that, it's about everything. I have a dog.
Right. Congratulations on passing. That's fantastic. All right. And we have, last week we were able to do this. This week we're able to do this. We have yet another new member. So Casey, if you come up and join us. So fellow Rotarians, please help me induct Kate into the Rotary Club of Sun Prairie. We asked you to join us because you are a worthy representative of your vocation and you believe in Rotary's ideals. In a moment, you will receive your Rotary lapel pin. Let's make that moment now. This pin will, warm with pride, help those whom we meet for the first time to anticipate that their dealings with you will be just and honest. It is through recognition such as this that Rotary has become an honored organization worldwide. Rotary is a service club in the finest sense. We work hard as we serve others. We find time for fellowship, and we use first names when addressing fellow members. We encourage a social atmosphere. Rotary is a non-racial, non-political, non-sectarian club and has clubs throughout the world. And for this reason, political and religious issues are not discussed in Rotary clubs. Fellow Rotarians, here is Kate, the newest member of the Rotary Club of Sun Prairie. Do not fail in your duty to her. Welcome to the Sun Prairie Rotary Club. Congratulations.
Where have your meetings or
I just have a couple of things for general announcements. First, I just want to thank everybody who was here last week, who either helped, partook, was present for last week's orientation. It's the first time we've ever done anything like that. I know all of us on the Board, we welcome any feedback that you have. I just want to thank everybody for a really interesting and great meeting. And then the only other thing that I have to mention is just to say, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. It's coming up very quickly, but everybody has a wonderful holiday. Should we have Rotary moments? Anybody, anywhere?
I can talk. Yeah. Just let everyone know, we set the date for the holiday party as December 12th. It's a Monday, and it's January 12th.
January 12th.
Monday.
Okay. I'm like, that'd be a very interesting day.
Monday, it'll be at Sal's. We'll email the invitations. We all have all the information.
Yeah. Any other Rotary moments from anyone? Okay. Well, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael to introduce his speaker.
Need a microphone. I can't hear because of it.
If you want to grab it, go for it. So,
I'm the only one that wants it.
so last week I mentioned the coffee chats that were done by the Chamber of Commerce. They're done every Friday. Like 80% of the people in there are bankers just trying to find a way to get loans. And they're so boring. But there's like 20% of the group that are other people, and they have like interesting things. So every week that I go, I'm trying to find someone in that 20% just to learn something new. I found Maddie a few weeks back. She started telling me what she does for work. And I was like, I've never heard of anything like this. So now when I see her, I beeline straight to her to give me fun stories about trees. And she is a wealth of knowledge. And I think you guys are really going to like her. Maddie, come on up.
Yeah, I'm gonna hold it or do you want this? Or I'm gonna give a standing one. You know, it's very complicated.
Thank you.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay? Okay, thank you for the introduction, Michael. I'm Maddie. I am a consulting arborist for a company in Tree Health Management. We are a private arboriculture firm that does all things tree, from inventories and site assessments, planting, pruning, tree removal, plant health care, risk assessments, and anything else you can think of tree related. I am ISA certified and I'm also tree risk assessor qualified. And today I'm going to talk to you about primarily oaks and how climate change is affecting them, and basically adding pest and disease pressures and what you can do as homeowners. Anyone here own any oaks on their property? Awesome. Okay. And if you don't own oaks, but you do own other trees, a lot of what I'm saying does still apply. So I hope you still get something out of it. So the reason I'm focusing on oaks is because oaks are our most important type of tree we have in our ecosystem here in southern Wisconsin. They are one of the biggest keystone species, meaning they support, provide food and shelter for thousands and thousands of species of insects, birds, and animals, more than any other type of tree, maple, birch, anything like that. You know, they support thousands of species of caterpillars specifically, and as a fun fact, while adult birds eat all types of seeds, berries, and other things and have more varied diets, young birds only ever eat caterpillars and larvae. So they're very, very important in that way. Acorns are a major food source for most animal populations, and were at one point in time a major food source for us humans too. And oak savannas used to cover almost a third of the state, primarily here in the southern region. If anyone here has ever read Doug Tallamy's The Nature of Oaks, it's a really fantastic book that goes into a lot more detail of the importance of oak species. And it kind of follows the oak through the life cycle of 1 year and everything that happens with it.
So losing our oak species would be a massive crisis to our ecosystem at large. So why are we really concerned with how the climate is changing, how this affects trees? We all hear a lot of how Wisconsin is getting on average warmer and on average wetter, but what does that really mean? So here I have some climate data. Some of this is from the National Oceanic Atmospheric Association. Some of this is from GLESA, and a lot of that data is actually collected specifically from Green Bay. But when we're talking about climate getting on average wetter, what that really means is we are having more large rain events. We think back to this major rain event, all the flooding in Milwaukee this past summer, or about 5 years ago, I know on the west side of Madison, we had another major flooding event where a whole neighborhood was under about 6 inches of water, which actually prompted the city to redo a lot of its stormwater system. So we are seeing more of those really heavy rain events. And in between those heavy rain events, though, we're also seeing more periods of drought. So rather than having this kind of like steady amount of rain throughout the growing season that's keeping our soils nice and moist and keeping our trees happy, we're kind of bouncing back and forth between more extremes. And you can kind of see that here with this chart, just how much, in decades past, we had a lot more of this kind of steady stuff sitting a little more closer to the average. And in recent years, it's just all over the map. So what happens is when we have these really intense rain events, the soils become saturated. We have issues with things like outbreaks of more fungal diseases. We have issues where there's not enough oxygen in the soil and we have root dieback as a result. And then in between that, during our drought periods, not enough rain is also very stressful for trees. So we have both too much rain causes stress, not enough rain causes stress. Beyond that, as far as Wisconsin getting warmer, well, what does that really mean? Some people think, oh, wetter and warmer, that doesn't sound so bad, but what's really happening is this kind of like volatilization of our norms. So we have, really you're seeing like first day of freeze is changing slightly, day of last frost, basically when our winter ends, is starting to decrease. Days with temperatures above 90 is surprisingly steady, even though I don't think it feels that way recently. But really the biggest change we're seeing in our temperatures is that the days with temperatures under freezing is really steadily decreasing the most, meaning we are just not having as cold of winters.
What's your chart? I can't see the number. What's the date of like 1950?
Yeah, it starts at 1950 here and comes up to 2010. So this isn't even really recording the last like 15 years of data. But what we're seeing with our winters really becoming a lot warmer is without those winter freezes, we're seeing a lot of big outbreaks in pest insects. Like think about after a warm winter, we see populations of mosquitoes and ticks really explode. The same thing is happening with insects that attack trees. And so these insects are having more pressure to find food and they're attacking more and more and healthier trees. In addition, I don't have this data point up here, but I read an article really recently. I wish I had added it in. Another major way we're seeing temperatures rising are overnight lows in the summer. So even when we have these really hot days in the summer, in decades past, it would still cool off at night and we would get some relief. And those trees would also get some relief from the heat at night. But now, even when we have these hot heat events, it's not cooling off at night anymore. And that's also like adding the stress. So I keep talking about adding stress. This causes some stress, that causes some stress. See, now, when we're talking about tree health, what we're really talking about is accumulating stress and how that contributes to death of trees. Healthy, happy, thriving trees rarely just up and die from one issue. It's normally all these little things kind of death by 1,000 paper cuts. Okay. So this graphic over here, if you're a forestry student, you were sick of seeing this. But I think this is incredibly helpful to understand tree health and how stress accumulates. This is the Madelyn disease decline spiral. On the outside, we have these predisposing factors. Like predisposing factors, we are talking about, has anyone here has ever heard right plant, right place, like plant things that are going to actually like your soil and your light conditions. So if you have the wrong species of tree planted in the wrong type of conditions, that's a predisposing factor. One of the major predisposing factors I deal with as someone in urban forestry are urban soil conditions. What I mean by that is pretty much anywhere your soil column has been really disrupted due to construction. So if you live on land that has had construction done on it in the past 100 years or so, that means you are living in urban soil conditions. And these are really, really bad for tree health. There's often a really lack of organic matter. The soil is incredibly compacted because we compact it so our buildings don't sink. And that is just, trees just don't thrive in these conditions. So we have most of our trees are already have some predisposing factors that are going to weaken. Trees have their own version of an immune system. And so when we have these stressors, that kind of weakens them. So from there, we have inciting factors. These are more acute events, things like drought, things like storms, defoliation effects, things that are kind of these big one-time events that cause like a real harder stress. So at this point in time, your trees are now dealing with a few things going on. This now leaves them open and susceptible to pests and diseases. And that's where we start seeing things like emerald ash borer. That's where we start seeing things like two-line chestnut borer, oak wilt. These are when these issues, they take root and really kill trees much more easily when they're already stressed. So I'm going to go through this next section a lot faster. I normally give this talk kind of a longer format. And if anyone's coming to the PBS Garden Green Living Expo this year, I'll be there too. It's a great expo, so much fun stuff there. But when I'm coming to someone's property and I'm looking at their oaks, these are kind of the primary things I'm looking at. Two-line chestnut borer, spongy moth, oak wilt, and then other potential issues. Two-line chestnut borer is a native insect to our area. Basically gets under the bark, kills the tree's vascular system, causes dieback and death of trees. Here's a couple of really good examples of things to look for. I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to see from a distance, but you see those little dead branches up at the top of the canopy. Up here is a tree that we've had on treatment that's in the process of recovering, but it still has some of these branches. Out here on the right is another version of this two-line chestnut borer, a lot further along the progression, and this tree is really struggling to get by it. Spongy moth. Has anyone heard of spongy moth in the articles in recent years? It's kind of been on the tree news. A lot of people have heard about this one a lot more. Also, if you ever have them and deal with them, they are disgusting. They come in such huge numbers and they die all over your yard. They climb all up the side of your house. And when they do die, they reek horribly. So this one is one that we do have outbreaks of it in the area. We get a lot of distressed calls about it because they're just really gross. But thankfully, we had a couple of really bad outbreaks in Dane County in the last few years. I think Sun Prairie was mostly spared, but a lot more on the west side. Devil's Lake State Park had a couple of really bad outbreaks in a few areas. And thankfully, due to a combination of factors, they have kind of moved on from our area for now. But they are a pest that tends to come back around every 7 to 10 years. Some really good examples. What they do is they really eat the leaves. So these guys don't necessarily kill your trees outright, but they do defoliate them, which puts a lot of more acute stress on your trees. And out over here in the bottom right, this was a client whose trees had a lot of other issues, predisposing factors. They were buried too deep. They were dealing with root rot. They were dealing with other issues. And then this client didn't notice or do anything until they saw all of these caterpillars like taking over their entire property. And at that point in time, the trees were already dealing with too many other issues that caused death of, she had 12 mature bur oaks and lost, I think, 4 or 5 of them. Oak wilt is the big one that I will talk to everyone about all the time. Oak wilt is a devastating, deadly disease of oaks. It spreads either by insects or it spreads underground via root grafting. So if you have a stand of oaks and one oak catches it, it can spread to your entire property of oaks. Really important things to know as homeowners if you were dealing with oak wilt or you own oaks. Never ever prune your oaks during the growing season. Your oaks should only ever be pruned in any capacity during the winter. If for some reason you have to prune your oaks, make sure they are pre-treated by a professional. At-home kits for treating oak wilt do not work, unfortunately. So I've had clients lose oaks because they found something online that was recommended to them by someone at a garden center and it didn't work. And they lost some pretty huge trees, and removals of multiple trees that size can cost like 20 grand. So yeah.
Is that a fungus?
That is a fungus, yes. So that's a vascular fungus, meaning it gets into the tree's vascular tissues, plugs them up, stops the tree's ability to uptake water and nutrients, and you often see it kind of starting at the top down. And one thing I want to note is a lot of these oak diseases have very similar symptoms, and it can be very difficult to diagnose things visually. So this is kind of what oak wilt looks like. This tree on the left was a client whose tree was showing atypical symptoms. So it started dropping leaves by the time she called us, by the time I was able to get out there, get a crew, collect a sample, send it to our diagnostic lab, and get a result that was confirmed oak wilt. The tree had already died. And it's hard to tell, but this trunk is about 3.5 feet wide. So from there, things to watch for. This is a bur oak. All three pictures here are the same tree. This is a bur oak that had confirmed oak wilt. And one of the biggest clues that you're going to see is this dropping of leaves, and the leaves are going to be partially still green, partially brown. And that is a major signal to you to call an arborist. Bur oak blight is another really similar disease to oak wilt. It is a little bit different in that it only affects bur oaks and it moves much more slowly. Be aware, if you just Google bur oak blight, there are 2 different strains of diseases. And if you just Google this, Google is going to give you results that saying not to worry, it's a minor disease, don't need to do anything. But there are different strains, and one strain is very deadly and the other one is not. So how, as homeowners, do you prevent things or stop this from happening? Preventative measures to take better care of your trees and try to get them as healthy as you can is going to be really important. This is primarily going to be watering, mulching, pruning, and just plain paying attention to your trees. I have met so many clients who I come out, I'm meeting with them, taking a look at their trees, and I'm looking up the whole time, and they kind of notice it, and they're like, you know what, I guess I've never looked up at my trees before. So I'm telling you, make sure you are looking up at your trees. Watering during times of drought is going to be really huge, especially going forward. As we continue to have more drought events, you know, there's only so much you can do about too much rain. Can't prevent that. But what you can do is water when times are dry. Mulching is going to be hugely important too. Mulch, there are a few, you're going to see a lot of incorrect practices. And if you just hire a landscaper to mulch your trees, they are most likely going to do it incorrectly, unfortunately. The landscaping industry had different goals from us arborists. We care about tree health and soil health. Landscapers care about how things look. So make sure that we are mulching correctly. You want to use a coarse organic mulch. Do not use landscape fabric. Do not let someone talk you into landscape fabric. I understand the wanting and being sold on the idea of never weeding again, but you're going to have weeds no matter what. So do not use landscape fabric. I can talk about that for a whole hour. And coarse organic mulch and landscape fabric. And the goal is to cover your tree's root system, not cover the base of your tree. The base of your tree has a lot of oxygen exchange with the atmosphere. You want that to be open and available. So I have my no volcano mulching, yes mulching. Should look more like a CD-ROM. Pruning, there are a lot of things you can do to prevent storm failures by preventative pruning and paying attention. Part of that is I would recommend everyone hire an arborist they trust and are like to work with to do an annual look of their trees. Just to drive it home, tree health depends on the health of its root system. The health of roots depends on the health of soil. Soil is so much more than just dirt. It is itself a whole ecosystem of bugs, insects, microbial critters, so much stuff is going on with soil. And if you can mulch and add compost and do things to feed that microbial life in your soil, you are going to see the direct effects in your tree's health. So I hope I didn't go too long. Anyone have any questions?
Is any one variety of oak more resistant?
Yes. Yep. So each individual pest and disease affects different species of oaks more. You know, white oak is particularly susceptible to land chestnut borer. Spongy moth is indiscriminatory; they'll go after any oak. But then oak wilt. So you can categorize all of our oak species into two categories: red oak group, which includes red oak, black oak, pin oak. Those are incredibly susceptible to oak wilt. If they catch oak wilt, they are going to die. There's nothing you can do to stop it. And even a mature 200-year-old oak can die in almost 3 weeks. If you have bur oak, the white oak group includes bur oak, white oak, swamp white oak, chinkapin oak, and a lot of this group freely hybridizes with each other. So any of those are a lot more resistant to oak wilt, and if they catch it, it is treatable. So yes, that's a great question.
In addition to like drought watering, I've gotten into the habit of watering all my trees and larger shrubs in the fall.
Yeah.
I've got like a rod that goes down and let it run for an hour. So is that a good practice, or am I just fix myself with?
No, that's absolutely a great practice. Yeah.
Come over to my house.
Yeah, great. Definitely keep doing that. Fall is a really, really vital time for trees. They put a lot of energy into preparing for dormancy, and we have had a weird habit in the last few years of our falls being really, really dry, and that's putting a lot of stress. So fall watering is fantastic.
If I can move off oaks for a second.
Yeah.
For a couple of years, we had a major problem with the Chinese beetles,
Japanese beetles, yeah.
Japanese beetles. And, I mean, they ate the leaves. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Of certain trees, I know linden tree, and I like that one.
Mhm.
But now the last couple of years, I haven't seen them hardly at all.
Yeah, Japanese beetles are another pest insect that kind of have this habit of having outbreaks for a number of years. And then for whatever reason, sometimes it's just we have a particularly hot summer or a particularly dry winter. They'll kind of move on. I was reading articles, the Green Bay area is now suddenly having horrible issues with Japanese beetles. And now here in the southern part of the state, they've kind of moved on. Some insects do just kind of have these like move through different regions of the area in this pattern.
Is there anything you can do about them?
There is. So there are, I do not necessarily recommend the traps. The traps can sometimes attract them to your property. So it's kind of how dedicated are you to the traps and how many traps do you want to put out. But there are other insecticide sprays that we use. We use a pollinator-friendly acetyloprin that particularly targets beetles. So there are other options out there. Systemic insecticides are not as effective against them, but yeah, absolutely, there are other options. If you are having kind of minor damage from them, you don't necessarily need to take action, but if they're getting to a point where they're defoliating your trees, that's the point where you want to do something about it.
If you were to, given all the changes to the climate going forward, if you were to recommend a couple of species to plant now, what would you recommend?
Yeah, a couple of species to plant, considering the way our climate is changing. There are a few that are a little bit better adapted simply because they they put on leaves later in the spring and lose them earlier in the fall. They're not everyone's favorite species, but they'd be black walnut, honey locust, kind of similar species to that. I would still very much so recommend anything in the white oak group, especially bur oaks. They are you know, they have the ability to live to be 600 years old. And then, there are some a little bit better, but you know, we have new tree diseases emerging all the time. Place. Measures the best you can. How's micro and there's a lot of time going, what on earth am I? Time outside was just really it for me. So I started kind of looking for ways to get involved. On the trees. So I actually did a lot of independent study, got independently certified, and
Is the county or state doing any programs, in about trees or the disease or?
you know, is trying budget they have to reach and I don't necessarily know. I don't know if I'm able to answer your question really adequately, but
And then what do you guys do for?
yeah, for larger acres. What we have a wide variety of approaches. Your property for this or that, like we have really well, and we just walk your acreage and just take note. Treatment plan for. We have a lot of tools in our.
Kind of like daycare.
Not necessarily. Um, so that's kind of why I really like to beat the drum and be able. Like some insects, like spongy moth, yes. Spongy. Same thing with like emerald ash borer. It's a flying insect. Go find whatever ash it can. But have really specific vectors. Like you have to have roots touching other oak roots for it to be able to spread. Are yours and some of them your neighbors. Other and all of a unified.
The Panthers